Hi, I'm Sarah O'Brien, a librarian from Hudson Area Public Library, and today we're doing a mental health panel with some of the counselors from the schools here in Hudson. So joining us today is Sarah Fleer from Willow River Elementary, Dan Buckle from the middle school, and John Dornfeld from the high school. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Hello.
Well, we'll just dive right into the questions, and you can give us any information as we go. As I mentioned, we're doing just a mental health panel to talk about mental health with the students in our communities. So we'll do each one. We'll do Sarah, and then Dan, and then John, just to go from youngest to oldest. So Sarah, what are you hearing about our kids and their mental health during this pandemic?
I would say that our students are quite resilient. They have no problems with the masks. I think they're really happy to be here. I visited with each student at the very beginning of the year just to take a pulse on how they were feeling about being back at school, and they were very positive about it. The one mental health upswing that I've seen is the anxiety, which I'm sure these other two can speak to as well. Those who had anxiety going into all of this, it has exacerbated it. But it's more of the small anxieties of they're checking on a lot of things, asking for input from teachers a lot more than we're typically used to. And so we see it in those ways. So I'm talking a lot to parents who are seeing some behaviors at home, and definitely making more mental health referrals out for therapists in our area.
Okay. How about Dan? What are you seeing in the middle school?
You know, the middle school kids start to think pretty deeply about things, and they sometimes don't know what to do with all those thoughts. We hear kids talking about they're a little worried about getting sick, or parents getting sick, or grandparents getting sick. They miss being out and being with their friends, and just change is hard. So all the little changes we've had to make become challenging for them to navigate that a little bit. When we were doing hybrid, or the kids that are doing distance learning, that's difficult for them to stare at a screen for 7.5 hours a day. The increased amount of screen time has been challenging for sure. I'd echo what Sarah said too, an increase in anxiety and stress. Just managing all the different parts that they have to manage now is a concern. We are in February now. It's cold, it's dark, so they're already dealing with some of that naturally, and then just add on the social pressures, that's adding to what we're seeing. We saw a heightened level of anxiety when we saw the uncertainty of, are we going to be in person? Are we not? Are we hybrid? What cohort? We're fully in person now, and that seems to be helping kids understand predictability is just good for them. So that's kind of what we're looking at, and we're wondering, like, we're hearing little snippets of it, but kids that have been home for so long, wondering how are they going to feel when they are able to step out of the house, and do they still have the social skills, and are they able to get over their fears of getting outside too? So looking at that ahead of time.
It's great that you're looking ahead of time. How about you, John? What are you seeing?
Well, it's interesting. The timing of this is good. We actually did the freshman depression screen, which we do with all of our freshmen. We haven't gotten through everybody yet, but we do have some data from yesterday. And so what's most typical for us is our numbers. We've been doing it for probably 8 or 10 years now. Somewhere between 9 and 12% of the students, and self-reporting, so we always know that the numbers probably skews lower, but 9 to 12% is really typical. I'm guessing between 10 and 11s on the average. This year we have 16, so it's a little bit of an upswing there. But I think the most interesting part of it was that our IDL kids are in the first. We've gotten through about 60 of them, but it's about just a shade under 1/3 of those kids are reporting some symptoms of depression. So almost double what our kids who are face-to-face are doing. And we kind of anticipated that might be the case. A little more isolated. Those kids that are IDL all the time have tended to struggle more academically. I think when we're face to face, that's when things are best for us. And hybrid was, at least okay too, because you at least got a couple of days a week with your teachers and your friends. And the time that when we went completely virtual before Christmas, our F list just really grew in that time. And kids that had been doing pretty well to that point, all of a sudden you look at their second quarter grade, and it for some of the kids it was really a steep fall. And I think that contributes to the anxiety when they're not doing well in school, because that's such an important piece of kids that age. And I think the kids that are IDL are doing a little less well. And that's not to say that we don't have some IDL kids doing extremely well. There's kids that do IDL and they do well with it, and some of them really like it. They feel like there's a little bit less pressure socially, and they can kind of get their stuff done. But yeah, so definitely an upswing. And I think any news source you look at for the last year, lots of discussion about across the country the increase in mental health issues with COVID. So
right, it's just amazing everything that we've had to deal with, and I'm sure you guys are working really hard trying to address everything, because none of us have experienced a pandemic before. So but this is a great transition. My next question was, for kids who are falling behind and worried about grades, how can we help them deal with that anxiety, both from the school perspective, but also from the home perspective and the peer perspective? Sarah, what's your input?
Our students don't have nearly as much skin in the game when it comes to, we're not getting credits, right? Like they are in the high school. So I don't know that we are necessarily seeing that anxiety from our students, but we are from parents. Parents are very concerned about their students falling behind. But what we're finding is our students, even during the time of our shutdown, we've done our progress monitoring, and our students are doing very well, all things considered. And so I think we've been surprised by how many of our students have been able to be right where we left off, which really speaks volumes to what parents were really working hard at when they were at home as well. So I don't know that that this question necessarily pertains to us, because our students aren't earning credits and have that pressure so much.
Okay. How about you, Dan? What are your ideas for the middle school to help kids deal with anxiety regarding grades?
Well, being stuck right in the middle, we are more highly elevated than what the elementary is concerned about, but not quite at the credit level where John's at. So kind of in that middle as usual. I'd say first and foremost, developmentally, we're working with kids that are ages 10 to 11 and then up to 14, sometimes even 15. But we still want to emphasize that it's important to partner with your kids as parents and guardians. Ultimately, it's still within your responsibility and your duties there to be shepherding your kid through any tough time, right? And so I'd say step in closer with your kids right now. And even though the school might seem kind of distant and intimidating, because I don't know how to do Google Classroom, I don't know where to check grades and stuff, it's a time to be stepping in and kind of taking a closer walk with them, because they're going through a lot too, and they are kind of stressed out about their grades, because we've had a lot of good kids that usually have decent grades, and they're just kind of struggling more now because they've had to adapt to a whole new way of handing in assignments, and teachers that are doing things in a new way of being online and in the classroom at the same time. So there's a lot of stress going on out there. So I would say first and foremost, walk along beside with them, and then also encourage your kids to reach out to teachers by email, by call the school counselor. Kids may not have the ability to do that. They may not be really feel comfortable doing that. Kids are emailing all the time, but they may not feel comfortable emailing a teacher or a counselor. And that's where, as adults, we can step in and say, okay, let's sit down and do that together. copy me in on that email. I'll help you write it. And to start those new skills, it's important to walk beside them with that. And then the normal good stuff, have a routine, right? Check grades often, get onto Skyward, get onto Google Classroom with them, have them explain to you as parents and guardians what Google Classroom is and what the assignments look like and how do I turn in an assignment. And then do that good thing of just doing schoolwork every day. Do a regular routine every day if possible. And work on building those relationships with teachers, especially if your kid is online all the time. That's harder to do because we're missing that normal interaction. So I would say build that online presence. Turn your camera on once in a while, so let them see your face so they can see your smile and have some time to joke around in class like you would usually do in class. And for the kids that are here, just really stepping in with those teachers and building those relationships, because it's just hard work.
Yes.
Dan gave a really comprehensive answer, and it was really good. One of the things that it did remind me of is just the capability and availability of parents. The whole equity issue. Our kids, some kids definitely have parents that will sit down with them each night, review things, and those ones you'd hardly have to encourage them. That would happen. But then we've got kids who, maybe it's a single parent family and mom or dad works at night, or they've had a hard day, or they don't have a job and they're stressed out and there's lots of things going on. So I think that, and so much of the research says too that the equity piece, the kids with less support tend to do less well during the pandemic, especially when we're either hybrid or virtual for sure. I agree with Dan. I think one of the things that kids, it seems like they're less like, first of all, it's oftentimes hard to get kids to ask questions of teachers or seek out support or let them know they're struggling. Even in person, that's not always easy for some kids, but I think when they're doing it virtually, even more so, they're less likely to reach out. So that's agreed that's such an important part, is trying to get kids and or families reaching out to the individual teachers and and just looking for that individual help that they might be able to get, or just some direction on what to prioritize and what's coming up. And ideally, if you've got a parent involved in that process, that's great. Our kids are a little bit older, and we'd expect them that they would probably be a little more responsible for themselves in that way. But that's not always the case. That's not, sometimes the maturity level is, isn't a whole lot different from middle school for some kids. But so I think that's important. I think if you have an opportunity to go to school face to face, I think we have, I know we started this semester with over 500 of our rounded to 1,800 students at the high school. We're doing full-time distance learning. So that's a pretty big chunk of kids. And so in some cases, we've been able to encourage parents or students to come back face-to-face. And that seems to fix a good amount of the problems because they're having that engagement every day. They're with their peers. They can more easily access their teachers. For some families, though, they have really strong reasons why they don't want their child in school right now. Much of it COVID related. But I think that then that's again where if you can get some parent help and you can get the kids reaching out, makes a big difference. I guess in the really extreme cases, of course, we refer out for therapy if that anxiety has just become almost paralyzing for them. They probably need some professional help. And the last thing I'd agree with Dan on too is that the reaching out to the school counselor too, and we can talk about options. And I know for more than a handful of kids, we've done things when they've gotten to that point where they're just completely overwhelmed and start avoiding, shutting down. In some cases, we can reach out to teachers and let them know that this is how this student is feeling right now. Is there anything we can do to accommodate that, modify some assignments? Sometimes teachers will omit certain assignments so they can focus on stuff that is going to matter the most, because kids look at 2 assignments and they don't know which one's more important, and sometimes one of them is critical and sometimes the other one's more of a fun assignment that might be enriching but might not be as critical to do. So I think that we've even have cases where we've had kids reduce their schedule during the semester, where you know, they might be carrying classes 7 hours of the day, and sometimes just having one less class and another hour in the day then that they can work on schoolwork can be helpful. So school counselors are pretty good resources.
Okay, well, just a follow-up question that any of you can feel free to jump in and answer. I heard you saying a lot that teamwork with your child, parents and children together, is very important. I myself have 4 children, and mine are all in the elementary still, but they are all different. And some of my children view the teamwork as you don't trust me. So do you have any way to help parents make them, you know, conversation points or anything, you know, because every child's different, and it truly is a I've got your back kind of thing. But some parents don't know how to address the trust issue, even when it is totally a trust thing. So,
right. One thought that comes to mind for me is that and because I get high school kids who feel like their parents are too much into their business and monitoring things, is that, you know, the more that you can show your parents that you're being responsible and doing what you need to do, there's a pretty good likelihood that maybe the parents will back off just a little bit. And so that'd be a suggestion I'd have for parents, is just to say, you know, it's like, you know, we want to give you that responsibility. We don't want to micromanage you. So show us that you're handling it, you're keeping up, you're doing what you need to do, and we can give you more space.
And I think at the elementary level, so much of our partnering is help. I mean, we would normally naturally do that partnering as well. You know, if we notice a student was missing assignments, we have parents who walk in and pick up. We just don't have those same connections as we have in the past. And so it's that partnership is very typical of elementary. And then when you're doing something new, learning online and trying to manage all of this, yeah, you're going to need mom and dad's help, and we're going to help you through it. And so it's not that we don't trust you, but this is just how elementary is. And we're going to walk with you through this because you've never been through a pandemic before. You don't know it all, right? So I think I use humor a lot with mine, but we're in this together. And in any other given year, I'd be communicating with your teacher about how you're doing. And if you're missing assignments, I'd be there to support you and having their back, like John had said too.
I would only add that I found it really helpful with middle school kids to set up a structure ahead of time. With this age, you're probably still in that realm of being able to limit activities such as video game playing or things like that. So setting it up ahead of time what your expectations are. You know, in our family, anything lower than a C is not acceptable. So if it's a C- and there's 5 missing assignments, then that means this gets taken away. Or if it's a B and above, then we get this. You know, finding those structures ahead of time so it's not a power struggle and you're not reacting, but you're being proactive and setting it up ahead of time so the kids can kind of know what to expect, and you can literally just point to a chart and say, well, this is where you're at right now, and sorry, I hope that we can get up to here. Let's go, let's work on that together. And here's how I'm going to support you so you can get up to there. And it allows them to own that victory then too, you know, while you're partnering with them and supporting them, but they know where it's at, you know. So that's what I would add to that.
that's wonderful. Well, our next question, I know John already kind of touched on a little bit, but are you guys seeing different needs and state of mental health from at-home learners versus the in-person learners?
I think it helps, as we talked about, looking to the future of how these students are going to reacclimate back with their peers when they come back. We've been very lucky to have a lot of our students who started out the year as IDL. They're now returning. To what's nice about the way that we've done it, I know our teachers have worked tirelessly in order to make this happen, but having the IDL students online while their class is also there and teaching at the same time, as tricky as it is, and you feel like you're trying to juggle way too much, it still maintains that classroom connection. And so through that, I think that's been great, especially if a student needs to quarantine for a time too. They're still connected to their peers. It's not the same as turning to your neighbor and talking, but there's still, you know what's going on in the classroom. You still have a pulse on it. And so I really have not had many of my at-home learners reach out, and to say what, you know, Dan said, I don't know that they know to even reach out to me. I've put out there different meetings, let's get together and play a game, and I've had very few join. And I don't know if that's just saturation of being on the screen, which I completely understand, but I really haven't had parents reaching out. It's been more the students that are physically here reaching out about different concerns for their child. And a lot of it shows up as behaviors in the elementary school. At the high school, you know, they sense the anxiety, they know what that feels like, they can name it. We're still working on teaching them what that feels like and what that looks like. And so it comes out in different ways, and working with parents through that. So that's been more, I've been more involved in that because I'm seeing that and because I'm communicating with those parents more. But I have not had parents, I imagine that when they return, we will have conversations at that point if there are still concerns. But the way Hudson has done it with keeping our students connected, even if they are IDL, I think socially has really helped our students in the long run.
That was good to hear. I wasn't sure if you guys were doing the synchronous model at the elementary too. And so that's the middle school too, is the synchronous. You know,
Yes.
the thing I like about that is, and I do agree, what a challenge for the teachers. I'm amazed that they can just kind of roll with it the way they're doing, and you know, and a large number of them, it's like, it's fine. You know, as they've gotten used to it, they've figured out ways that make it work for them. But I think what I like is that they get that structure of the day. So our kids, even if they're IDL, you know, they have a first hour class to log into, they have a second hour class to log into, and throughout the day. You know, it's a bummer that it has to be so much screen time, but I think the other way is I think they would drift further away if they were just left more to their own to work on things at their own pace when they get to it. So.
Mm-hmm. And I would just say that at the middle school, what we're seeing is it kind of boils down to lack of connection. You know, if I'm dealing with kids and helping them out who are at home, it's because they've just kind of lost connection with classes, lost connection with students, and they're just feeling that isolation. And another thing we're kind of working with that's difficult at this developmental stage is the increase in social media use. I've heard from a few parents that they feel like they have to give their kids the social media outlet because it's the only way they connect to their friends. But then we have to keep in mind that these guys at this developmental level still don't know all the ins and outs of social media use, and they're sometimes really bad at it. So they fall into the traps that social media has in it. So just to continue to be vigilant about social media use. And it all comes down to they're afraid that they're missing out, and they are, you know, in a way, understandably. Can't, you know, force anyone to come to school, and people have to approach it in their own way. And then it just means more deliberate planning for parents and for kids to be able to connect in meaningful ways, either at home, online with a friend, or things, you know, in that way that's developmentally appropriate.
And I think it's, even at the high school level, I think it's appropriate for a parent to have them have some time out from their phone, you know, and maybe during the time that's kind of they're supposed to be working on homework, you know, even as hard as it is, giving it up for a couple of hours, they'll be more productive. The more that phone is there, it's a complete distraction. We use that in schools sometimes. We have some kids that work up in the library for Sometimes they're doing Wisconsin virtual school courses. We have a handful of kids that are actually doing IDL, and social anxiety prevents them from being in the classroom, but they're okay with being in school, still doing it virtually, but being in school. So we've got eyes on them, and it's typically been kids that have struggled. And so it's like, well, why don't we try this? But they have rules up in the library if they're not being productive, that at the beginning of the hour, the phone comes up to the desk and you get it back, when there's a break. So yeah, the social media is a lot to navigate for sure.
Okay, well, and I think we also covered this one a little bit, but for middle and high school, has switching between in-person, hybrid, and at-home learning had an impact on the mental health of the students or teachers? And what suggestions have been helpful?
I mean, obviously, yeah. Short answer, it's hard. We all thrive better when there's predictability and stability. I agree with John. The synchronous learning has been the best model for kids that have been out and then have to come back in and then have to be out. They do stay the most engaged. I mean, that's just hands down for sure. So yeah, and the teachers, amazing people that have just been able to be so flexible. Like, okay, I'm teaching a class full today, and now there's 2 people in my class tomorrow. All right, and they just do it, and it's just inspiring, really, to watch them work. They were struggling at the beginning, like everybody was. They're still struggling now because it's still challenging, but things are leveling out a bit more. Not to minimize the struggle at all, but it is getting better for sure. I think giving grace to each other, knowing that this is hard, and assuming positive intent that everyone is doing the very best that they can, helps to kind of reduce some of that stress and just say, yeah, I know this is hard. It's not what any of us would choose, and it's where we're at. So let's move forward.
The transition back and forth between the different modes of instruction has definitely been hard. And I think for the reasons Dan outlined, that, people are better if they've kind of got their routines and they can stick to it. And, and then not knowing kind of when you might be coming back, and the split, even the split into the 2 different cohorts was stressful for kids because they're looking at most of their friends being in one cohort and we've actually, our administration has actually been tried to be flexible if a parent reaches out, as long as there wasn't too big of imbalance between the 2. If they could make a case that, this would really be better for my student if they can move from cohort B to cohort A. And I give credit to our admin that if they can work it out, they work it out.
Great. Now, what about you guys? How has your job as school counselor had to change in 2021 school year to meet the students' needs in this pandemic?
I haven't noticed anything, guys. Nothing?
No, nothing's different.
Yeah.
Oh, I would say a big thing for me is I run a lot of small groups, and specifically social skills groups. And so when the Department of Health said that our groups the students need to be 6 feet apart, and you can only meet if you're going to be any closer than that, you can only meet for 15 minutes. So you can't teach kindergartners social skills and have them 6 feet apart. It just doesn't work. And so I've had to I kind of adjust and swing with that, where I just have shorter groups that I meet with more frequently. Things like lunch bunch, I'm not able to do because of the concerns there. So there are things that I've definitely had to let go of, which just means that I need to make more intentional efforts in the hallways and making sure that I'm connecting with kids in that way. Just because they're not in my office and meeting with me. I am also, life skills is taught synchronously. So I have had to try what the teachers are doing and engage students online. There's a lot of teamwork in my lessons too. So that's been tricky well, you actually physically need to be here to get the gummy worm in the thing. So I don't, there's a lot of forgiveness on the part of the students for me. But I think it's been good for me to see what the teachers are dealing with too. And like both Dan and John have said, our teachers go in and watch them, and it's just magic. I mean, the things that they're able to do with IDL, and the way that I even had to cover a class, for example, and it was math, and I do not do math. And so the other 4th grade teacher piped in and was teaching this class and her class at the same time, and the IDL students, and I was just there for crowd control. And so the fact that they're able to swing that is just amazing. So I've learned a lot from them as well, and it's we're all in it together mentality. I know we're so sick of hearing that, but it really has been all hands on deck. We're all being really creative. I think school counselors are very used to being square pegs trying to fit in round holes, where we always are adapting and trying to make happen what we need to happen for our students. I think we're finding creative ways to reach our students at home, and making those connections, making sure we have check-ins available. So it's been interesting, and I do miss the closeness and being able to have students in my office longer and not worry about those things, but I know that we'll get back to that too. So that's how my job has changed.
I would say, I mean, a lot of what Sarah said too. Essentially, we're still doing the same things we've always done. Our mission is the same. It's just different ways of doing it, you know. So it's a lot of Google Meets, sitting with a kid while they're typing away in their kitchen. You know, it's like, oh, that's very different, you know. And having parent meetings online, and so those kinds of things, like lots of walk and talks, you know, so you can talk with the kid while you're walking through the hallway, doing groups very differently, smaller groups, things like that. But bigger changes, more fundamental changes it's been more challenging to identify what barriers are in place to kids' education. It's hard to tell what's a learning disability versus what is a environmental factor. Are they really struggling with depression, or are they just sick of IDL? You know, I mean, things like that have just become more challenging because I don't feel like I have a normative sample of what this looks like. I don't know what kids look like, what's normal in a pandemic, right? So it's hard to make those decisions. And then an interesting thing that we've all noticed here at the middle school is that kids, I don't know, John, if you've seen this too, but kids do not seem to be reaching out with the same frequency that they used to for help. Something about this, maybe just even the mask and the plexiglass and the rules are like, kids feel like they should just stay where they're at, you know, and just kind of do their thing. Maybe even just that feeling isolated maybe makes them feel like they can't reach out for help, but that's been a really interesting challenge. So it makes us have to be much more proactive. Like, I got to get this kid, and this kid, and this kid. I have to do that initiating, where sometimes they would a little bit more. That's the biggest changes I've seen.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because when I was over at the middle school, when we were doing picking out classes with the 8th graders for next year, a couple of teachers had said that, and they were speculating too. They didn't know what it was, but just a lot less interaction in the classroom, a lot less coming forward, asking questions. I noticed in the high school, just even in walking down the hallway, there's not the banter, there's not the talking, there's, you know, and kids who probably would normally say hi to you are just, you know, and I do think a big piece of it is mask. And sometimes it's hard to recognize kids too.
Oh yeah.
Especially I have actually half my caseload this year is new because we did some restructuring. And so with some of the kids, I've never seen them without a mask on. And I don't know if I would for sure recognize them if they had the mask on. So it is really, it's different that way. I think
then you add the snow hats on top of it.
Yeah.
And that's it with the kindergartners. I go into lunch, I'm like, oh, that's what your mouth and nose look like. I mean, you don't know these kids' whole faces. Right. And then when they added the winter hats, then I was just, I mean, you have very little to work with. So then you have to memorize jackets.
The other part that I'll add is I've never done more just electronic communication, primarily email, with parents and kids. You know, it's always been, in a normal year, kids just swinging by the office quick to ask a question, setting up a time to meet. Now their mode of communication with me most of the time is an email. sometimes it's Google Meets and sometimes it's something we can do over that. But I spend so much time trying to keep up with the email correspondence and then the follow-up that you have to do depending on what the task is that you're working on. So I don't enjoy that as much as I enjoy just being able to be with kids more. So
Right.
For sure.
Okay, well, what are some helpful tips you can give parents to help their kids through this pandemic? We've talked about a lot of things on the school thing and the teaming up, but just in general, do you have any ideas?
I think it's really important, routine, like Dan has alluded to, keeping things as consistent as you possibly can. And I think it's also validating their feelings and helping them understand that I don't know either. And how hard it is for us as adults. I feel like it's really easy to say, you have no idea what it's like as an adult to process this pandemic. And you've got it so easy. Like, you just have to either go to school or stay home and be on the computer. But validating that those social connections are so important to them. And, you know, even thinking about sports and things that kids are involved in and not being able to do that. And us as adults, we have that perspective where we can say, if you miss one game in high school basketball, your 10th grade year, you're not going to remember that when you're 35. But for them, it is all that they have. My 8-year-old missed her birthday, right? Worst thing in the world. And I'm thinking, just your 8th birthday, I don't even remember mine. But for them, it's so real. And so I think just validating and letting them know, I think practicing mindfulness with them, talking about anxiety, talking about how this is all normal and collectively we're all going through this, and processing how we manage stress and how we manage anxiety. And maybe finding creative ways to do fun things, and what are some safe ways that we can enjoy this, you know, things like that. So people have come up with very creative ways to celebrate lots of different things, between the parades,
drive-by birthdays.
Yeah, the drive-bys. And I think that speaks to human nature and showing our students, like, right, but when things are hard, look at these people who rise. I mean, there's a lot of hope in it too. And so I think reminding them of that and letting them have a bad day and listening to them and not trying to fix it, because we can't, but having that true empathy of, yes, this is really hard and it's really, really sad and frustrating.
Yeah, I guess I would add, turn off the news. You know, just raw news footage for these kids is really tough. The kids that I've seen that have struggled the most are the ones that are just getting unfiltered, any social media, any media outlet, you know, just it's tough. At our developmental level, it's, you know, as parents, we need to be their filter still, you know, and not to keep them in the dark, because we can't, you know, it's all around. We got to have good, honest conversations. And our kids are really, really smart, but they're not always wise, right? And so we have to add our wisdom to their skill set, right? So just finding that balance of not overwhelming them, but not treating them where you don't think they understand anything, because they do. They understand a lot, great ideas, and be in the filter. So, and I would say what Sarah said, be really deliberate with social interactions. Like they may even be saying, I don't really feel like it. I don't want to. I know, but it's Tuesday, and every Tuesday we do a Zoom meet, a Google meet with Grandma and Grandpa, or with Jimmy or Johnny or Susie, you know, and just make it happen. And then I would say, because you're at home, what a great time to enjoy them, right? And spend more time. Maybe adults are at home too, being deliberate about shutting down the screens, spending time together doing what they enjoy, or expand their enjoyment of things that you enjoy, you know, whether it's reading or art or anything like that, and give responsibilities at home. It's a good time for structure. Chores are really good, you know, making them feel like they have a part in the home that you would miss if they didn't do, you know, so then they feel really still invested in what's going on inside where you can control, you know, because pretty much our 4 walls are about all we can control right now. So, you know, doing that. And so, and like Sarah said, give permission, normalize anxiety, normalize these anxious feelings. Like, yeah, I'm nervous too, but here's what we can control, identifying that and just listening and letting them ask questions, you know, just have those good discussions.
Yeah, I think of the words patience, understanding, and calm. I think especially because we do have our share of kids too that are very nervous about the COVID pandemic. And then we have kids who have parents who might believe that, it's no different than the common flu and masks aren't important. And, so it depends on who they're listening to. And even news sources can have such drastically different views on things. But I think the calm part about, especially as if you have a child that's, and this can be a high school child too, really, obsessively worried about getting sick, or their mom and dad getting sick, or grandma and grandpa getting sick. You've got to be able to share facts with them for sure, but help them understand that, even though there's lots of people that have gotten it and have gotten very sick, and some have died, the majority of people that doesn't happen to. But I guess just trying to be calm about it, and not, and not being, and this is hard, especially if you're a parent that is extremely worried about it too. But trying to be a little bit more of that voice of reason, and calm with your kid, even if you're not feeling calm inside, because they'll feed off of that for sure. I think the whole activities piece is really important. And I think both Sarah and Dan mentioned that it's nice at the high school right now. Most of our sporting activities are going on and seem to be going on without a hitch for the most part as we've gotten further into the school year. But I know there's activities that aren't going, and then I think it's getting creative with coming up with some new ideas. What is something that you could use this time that maybe you'd be willing to try, that might, some new hobby that you might want to start. But I think that if kids lose, because those activities so often are part of their identity too. And so if that's taken away, there can't just be this big void. I think helping them figure out ways that they can spend their time that they can still feel good about. And I realize that's not is an easy concept, but hard to carry out though sometimes. So, and then the stuff that just helps all the time is, getting enough sleep, staying off their electronics at night, eating well, trying to get, some kind of exercise or activity going too. That's good for anxiety at any time. So.
Great. You guys all have such wonderful advice. Thank you so much. Well, obviously the pandemic hopefully won't last forever, and there will be a time to come back. So some people are doing life as normal as they can, and some, for whatever reason, as you mentioned, need to stay home. So how can we ease anxiety for those that have been more homebound as they return to more normal activities? Any ideas?
I think it's important not to avoid activities. With anxiety, the more we avoid, the more it strengthens. And so I would say baby steps with those students who are more significantly anxious about it, but making sure it happens. I think it's really easy when we see our kids being really worried and scared, rescuing them and saying, okay, yeah, we just won't do this just yet. But I think it's really important, bring them to the grocery store with you. Let them see that everyone's wearing masks. If you look at the schools, we've been here since September, and it's working. What we're doing is working. And so I think pointing that out, that if we follow all of the mitigation strategies, it's okay, it's safe. There's a safe way to do this. And so I think it's those activities that they want to do and that are safe, or try one or two to ease into it so that they can get back in. I think those are the students I'm the most worried about coming back to school, those who are already feeling, we have students who have separation anxiety on just any given year. And so what has this done to exacerbate that, where they've been able to be home for all of this time? And so I think it's important to know that it will be hard, but still as a parent, we need to push them into those social situations that we feel is safe, obviously. But start small, be with them. We're going to do this, and we're going to overcome this, because I think otherwise it's really easy to avoid. So start small, but encourage those, especially as the summer comes up, right? Summer is coming. Getting outside, those outdoor activities that we've seen are, with the fresh air and things like that, get them involved in summer activities, summer school, summer camps. I think it's important to start dabbling in those before the next school year so they can feel more confident socially when they return. And know that your teachers are going to be so excited to see you when students come back. I mean, we miss you. We truly do miss you. Even if you feel like we've forgotten you, we haven't. We really, really miss you, and we want you back, and we're excited to have you.
Yeah. And I think at the middle school level, you can start adding, processing facts with them, like John alluded to. Yeah, lots of people have gotten COVID, and most people recover, most people recover, right? Ensure them that their bodies are able to handle lots of things. They're okay. And that schools really are not a big place where COVID is spread. Even the CDC is saying that. So that's good. So if you're worried about coming to school, this is a pretty good place to come. We're doing a good job of it. And then just being there to process after the school day. Let them come home and just dump, that was so scary. Yeah, tell me about it. What parts were scary? What was easy, And then if they're really, really anxious, plan ahead of time. If it is school, connect with a favorite teacher, a counselor, administrator, lunch assistant, whoever it is, to check in and say, how is it midway through the day right now? Do you need a break? Can you take 5 minutes? Do you need to go step outside? Whatever it is that you need to do, just to connect and then reset. Because if we know in the middle school for sure, if I can give a kid a 10-minute break, I'll probably get another three hours out of them before they need another one, versus I just can't do the whole day. So being deliberate about setting up those structures ahead of time can really help too.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And I think that the older the kids get and the more life experience they have, parents can be able to talk to them about, because so much of the anxiety is more that anticipation of what's going to happen versus once they're there and the school day is going on, typically things go pretty well. And then if they're a few days in, it's just that much better. So getting them to understand that, you've been through other things where you've been kind of fearful about doing, and when you've actually done it, you found out that it's gone really well. So try to draw on some of their kind of their successes in the past with getting through things, but just reinforce too. It's like every day it's going to get a little bit better. You'll be a few days in and it'll feel like you never left. Because I think there's some truth to that. They seem to be able to, when they do come back here, it's like all of a sudden things are, they hit the ground running and everything operates pretty well. So that'd be my thought.
Great. Well, we have talked about so many things. I think we'll wrap it up for today, but do you guys have any other advice or tips or resources or anything else that you would like to share with everyone before we wrap up?
Reach out to us. I'm here and I want to hear from you. When I've had conversations with parents, it's been wonderful. We called several of our at-home learners just to see what they're thinking about next year. And it was so good to hear their voice. We have a lot of resources, and if we don't have resources at our fingertips, we know where to get them. And that's what school counselors do. We're here to help support you and your child. And so email us, call us, maybe not email John, he's got a lot of emails, but call us. We want to hear from you, and we want to be helpful supporters in your child's as they work through this. You're not alone.
I echo that. I would say it's okay to acknowledge that that we're in a very abnormal time, and we hear a lot of the phrase new normal and things like that. I think it's okay to say, no, this is not normal. And you're right. You're feeling this and we are too. And you know what? Someday we'll probably get back to normal. And that's a more hopeful statement, I think. So just giving validity to the feelings that we're all having, and then walk through it together. And we would love to be a part of whatever that looks like: school, social, emotional, all those things.
Yeah, I think that in talking to parents, I think sometimes their mind can be put at ease when you can share with them, you know, how typical that is for students at that age to be going through something similar to what your daughter or your son is going through right now. You know, we're hearing that story all day long from a variety of people day after day. So, you know, especially if they're second guessing how they have handled things, and, you know, and we know there's not a good manual out there on handling a pandemic for sure. I mean, a manual on parenting is even, that it's hard to meet all the situations, but I think that, yeah, just everybody's doing their best, and I guess just go back to the patient understanding and calm, and do your best. And yeah, I mean, I feel like things are going to get back to you know, a more normal, more like it's been in the past. It may not be as much this year, but hopefully the following year it'll be closer to what it used to be.
And John is so right. If I had $1 for every time I had a parent say, "Oh, good, it's nice to know I'm not the only one."
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of that, and we're great people to reach out to because we are hearing it, like you said. And so if it's happening at your house, odds are it's happening at a lot of other houses, and you're not alone. And I know for me, just hearing that helps me with my parenting as well.
Well, thank you all for your time. I can't thank you enough. I know that me as a parent, it's really great to hear all that you have to say, and take your tips and advice and everything. But also, as a parent, I see all that you guys are doing as counselors and at the schools, all of them, the teachers, the counselors, you are all doing an amazing job. So thank you all for your effort and helping us all together get through this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for your support. The parents
Yep.
have been phenomenally supportive of
Oh.
us, and
Oh, it's so good.
we couldn't do that without you partnering with us.
Yeah.
So thank you for all of
Sure.
your love and patience.
Absolutely.